This week on the Navigating Personal Growth podcast. Today, we are going to face our fears together, and I'm going to get real and authentic and share some fears with you that I currently have and ones I've tackled over the years. And so we're also going to talk about how to overcome these challenges in your life and step out of your comfort zone. Hey Navigators, my name is Brooke and I am your host here today on the Navigating Personal Growth podcast. If it's your first time, welcome to the channel. If you are new, be sure you subscribe and follow us on your favorite platform because that helps us get our message out to more people. And that is what we are about here, navigating personal growth together and making sure that everyone feels less alone in their journeys. Today, we are going to face our fears together, and I'm going to get real and authentic and share some fears with you that I currently have and ones I've tackled over the years. And so we're also going to talk about how to overcome these challenges in your life and step out of your comfort zone, because that is where the real change happens in your life. And you can really take from where you are to where you want to be and shorten that timeline like that if you are willing to step out of that comfort zone and face your fears. So, fears are the things that hold us back from our dreams. They are. The difference in where you are and where you want to be, right in the middle of that lies one of two things: faith or fear. And fear is the opposite of faith. And they both live inside us, both of them. Okay, so faith lives inside of us and fear lives inside of us. And the one that speaks is the one that we feed. So are you constantly feeding into the faith inside of you that God and the universe and the energy around you are going to provide what you need? Are you feeding into the fear and living in the scarcity mindset of what if I don't, but what if it doesn't, but what if it? Faith or fear? Which one are you going to feed? And today we're going to talk about how we can overcome these fears and challenges in our life. Because if we, let's get real, y'all. Everyone has fears, right? They're different. I was going to wait in the episode to talk about this, but I'm just going to go on and launch into it. I have a really quirky fear. And if you want to make fun of me for it, then at least make fun of me to my face. But I have a fear of calling people on the phone, like doctor's offices, like people I don't know. It's like overwhelmingly, like Rebecca sitting behind the camera and helps make the podcast happen every week. She makes phone calls for me as my executive assistant because I don't know what it is. It was like this in high school. Like, I will talk to anyone. I'm very friendly, but like picking up the phone and calling someone I don't know is so weird to me. Like, to make an appointment. I don't know why. I don't know. I cannot tell you why I do not like this, right? I don't know. Is it a fear of rejection? Like, I need to follow my own advice on this. It doesn't actually cause a problem in my life very much. So, here we go. Maybe it's not one I want to dig into, but we will talk about ways we can face these fears. So there is my quirky fear. There's me being vulnerable so that you don't have to be afraid and have fear that someone's going to make fun of you about what you're afraid of and your fears, right? Okay. So surely you're probably not scared of also calling people on the phone. If you are, you better email me. All right. chat@brookeplack.com. All right. So fear is the opposite of faith. Living in fear means that we do not have the faith that we're going to be provided everything that we need. And it is the opposite also of believing in ourselves. And some of us were raised, some of you, some of them, if you're not ready to wear it yet, in an environment, maybe a household, a family, a church, a friend group where you were told that you weren't good enough. And finding that belief in yourself is really hard. And so that is fear. And where does the fear come from? We're going to talk about the top fears that everyone has. And honestly, it's definitely one of the hardest things to conquer in our life is to face our fears. So if it is something that you struggle with, like me, even if it's quirky or not, you're not alone. So what is the definition of fear? It is the natural response to risk, but can be reframed as an opportunity. So what are people's most common fears? All right. Number one, like on every survey ever taken everywhere, the number one fear is ding, 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 public speaking. And like, I was born for that. But just because that's not my fear doesn't mean I don't have one on the list, right? So public speaking's number one. Death is number two. Failure, rejection, especially social anxiety. That's where social anxiety comes from, the fear of rejection. Spiders, heights, the dark, flying, small spaces, change or the unknown, snakes, the loss of loved one, and illness. So where are you at on the list? Okay. So death, no, we're all going to die. I wake up every day knowing my husband and my son are going to die. I know it's morbid. There's not a day that goes by that I don't think about the fact that they're going to die. But the way I choose to reframe it is to appreciate the moments I have, right? Because life is so finite in that time we have. Spiders, I will kill a spider all day, every day. Now, if it was a tarantula, like, I don't know about all that. But like a regular spider, got no problem squishing that. Snakes, I am gone out the front door. I don't live here anymore. Come take care of it yourself. I cannot do snakes. Oh, reptiles they make my whole back crawl. But, so see how different and individualized these are? Like small spaces, I don't know that I've ever been like trapped in a small space. I don't think I would like it, but I'm not saying like I hate it. Like my son has this little cubby hole under his playhouse, and like he has a slide that comes off his playhouse, and he has this little cubby hole, it has a door, and he like goes in there and plays video games and like this tiny little cubby on his, I say video games, on his little Switch. And I don't think I would enjoy being crunched up in a little tiny hole, but like maybe that's a kid thing, right? So everyone's fears are very personalized, and that's okay. And I think acknowledging that we have these fears is our first step in figuring out how we can overcome them and build the life of our dreams. Ralph Waldo Emerson said, "Do the thing you fear, and the death of fear is certain." I believe him except snakes, okay? So I believe him about everything on the list, like learn to be a public speaker, learn to do the things that are hard for you, all that. But when it comes to snakes, you are wrong, Ralphie. That is not right. There's definitely, you put me in a bathtub full of snakes on Fear Factor. Oh, I'm out. I'm not doing it. But when we're talking about life in general, do the thing you fear, and the death of fear is certain. For example, if I was scared of a snake being in my yard and therefore I never went outside in my yard, that would be causing a problem in my life. I just prefer not to be around them. Like I'm not going to not go outside and walk barefoot and do all the things, right? All right. So let's share some stories about fear and how this can show up in your life. So I'm going to share a couple of instances in my own life, and then also share some stories about some people that I feel like you'll be able to relate to. So first, I want to tell you about one of my most recent fears and my biggest fear. So if I look at the list, other than snakes, that's not like a crippling fear. I think one of the biggest things that motivates me is the fear of failure. So I don't want to fail. Now, I don't think that fear manifests in the way that I don't take chances and I don't try new things, because that is being an entrepreneur. That's what I have to do. But I don't want to fail. It's not crippling. It's not immobilizing. But I will tell you, it became that way for a little bit. So I've shared on the podcast before, 2024 was a very hard year for our companies. Okay, we have experienced a considerable amount of growth in the 10 years that I've been operating businesses. And as the economy slowed to a halt, so did our growth. Inflation went up. Our cost of supplies, insurance, all the things, our margins went nil. We all of a sudden didn't have pay raises to give, bonuses to give out. The things that we always do, our way of business, halted. And for several weeks, I had this like crippling fear that I wasn't going to be able to like pay my utility bill. And what if I lose my house? And y'all, I have a savings account. I got a retirement account. I got equity in the house. I could take out a HELOC. All of these options that could happen if I really needed it, right? But I didn't even think about any of those because I was so afraid of failing for a brief window. And when I was able to sit down and do some reflection and really dig in, I realized I had irrational fears that weren't real, things that weren't actually going to happen. Okay, so now what am I going to do about it? We're going to make budget cuts. We're going to restructure some spending. I'm going to go a couple months without a paycheck, and then we'll get back on track as the economy takes off. And here we are several months later, things are looking better, and we keep on rolling, right? And so sometimes those fears can be temporary. When they become pervasive and they stick with us for our whole lives, that's when it can really show up in your journey and be holding you back as you make decisions to try to do new things. And as we said at the beginning of the podcast, the title of the episode, step out of your comfort zone. Okay. So that was one that's been recent for me, like in the last, 3 to 6 months by the time, if you're listening to this episode when it was dropped live. Another thing that happened to me this at the end of 2024 was I had a miscarriage. And so I'm 40 now. I was 39 when I got pregnant on purpose. We'd been wanting to add to our family. And we got pregnant. We were super excited. And I miscarried in the first trimester. And so one of those things, there is an amount of shame that comes to a woman who does not carry a pregnancy to full term. Okay. My first pregnancy, I carried to 30 weeks. This pregnancy, I carried for 10 weeks. It is something innate in womanhood. There's a feeling that you should be able to do that, right? It's just part of who we are. I can't explain it. If I hadn't been through it, I wouldn't have known, right? And so there's a shame that comes with that. And shame is not from God. Shame is something that is from the devil. It is not from good. It is completely from evil. And the fear of rejection when you share about the hard things like that. But if I didn't share that truth with people, how would they ever feel less alone? And that is my mission in life, to leave an impact and for people to feel less alone. The more connected we are, we reduce suicide rates. We increase mental health. We bring joy. But if I never shared about that hard, it wasn't easy to share. It wasn't something I was proud of. It was the amount of comments I got from people when I got pregnant of, what are you doing? Do you know how old you are? Betty, I know how old I am, and it ain't none of your business if I want to get pregnant at 39, okay? So there was already that, and then I didn't carry to term, and so it's like, oh, people are going to be like, well, she was too old anyway, or she, voices that I didn't need to listen to, right? But I shared anyway. Share it anyway, because you know what? Someone's life will be touched, and someone's life could be changed by the pain that you went through, and I personally believe that that's the purpose for it. The purpose for our pain is so that we can turn around one day and say, come on, you're going to be okay. I've been there. I've been through it, and you're going to be okay. Right? All right. This is a story about Liam. He'd always dreamed of starting his own business. For years, he worked his corporate job, but quietly in the corner, he was in his free time, he was building ideas for his tech startup. Every time he thought about pitching his concept to investors, he froze. What if they hated it? What if he failed and became a laughingstock? The fear of failure kept him stuck in his comfort zone, convincing him the timing isn't right. One day, Liam's mentor, Priya, gave him some advice that changed his perspective. Liam, failure isn't the opposite of success. It's part of the process. Every successful person fails. What sets them apart is that they keep going. That night, Liam couldn't stop thinking about Priya's words. And he realized that fear wasn't just about failing. It was about how he would feel if he never tried. And deciding he couldn't let fear define him, he committed to taking action and started small. Instead of pitching to investors, he practiced explaining his ideas to friends and family that he trusted. Their feedback helped him refine his concept and build his confidence. Next, he joined a local entrepreneur group where he practiced delivering pitches in a low-pressure setting. His first few attempts were nerve-wracking, his voice shook, and he stumbled on his words. But instead of retreating, he analyzed what went wrong, made adjustments, and tried again. Over time, he grew more comfortable and began to see his mistakes as opportunities to learn and not reasons to quit. Finally, the big day arrived. In his first formal pitch in front of a panel of investors, he stood in front of the room and he felt a familiar knot of anxiety in his stomach. But he also felt something new, pride. He had prepared, practiced, and shown up despite his fear. Taking a deep breath, he delivered his presentation. And when he finished, there was silence. Liam braced himself for rejection. I'm getting all teary-eyed, y'all. If I start sniffing, you know why. And one investor leaned forward and said, "This is a fantastic idea. Let's discuss next steps." Liam walked out of the room in disbelief. Not only had he survived the pitch, but he secured his first investor. And more importantly, he realized that the fear of failure had been far worse than failure itself. By facing the fear, he opened the door to possibilities he never imagined. Man, that's good because his life will forever be changed by betting on himself. All right, listen to the story about Emma. Her fear is totally different than Liam's, but just as valid. She'd always been close with her mother, Lisa, and they were more than family. They were best friends. Lisa was the first person Emma called with good news and the one she turned to when life felt overwhelming. But everything changed when Lisa was diagnosed with a serious illness. The diagnosis hit her daughter Emma like a tidal wave. She was once vivid, and her world now felt muted by fear. Every moment with her mother became tinged with the dread of losing her. She found herself pulling away emotionally and creating distance that would somehow soften the inevitable blow. Lisa noticed and gently asked one day, "Why are you so quiet, sweetheart? Why are you not coming to see me?" Emma broke down. "I'm terrified, Mom. I don't know how to live without you." Lisa took her hand and said something that stuck with Emma. "We don't control how much time we have, but we do control how we spend it." Those words shifted something in Emma. She realized that fear was robbing her of the precious time they still had together. She decided that instead of letting her fear dictate her actions, she would focus on making memories with her mother, no matter how long they had. Emma started small. She planned weekly tea dates where they talked about everything: life, books, old family stories. She's created a scrapbook with Lisa, documenting her mother's favorite recipes and family traditions. They even took a short trip to Lisa's favorite beach, something her mother had always wanted to do. As the weeks turned into months, Emma noticed a change in herself. She was no longer consumed by fear. Instead, she felt gratitude for the moments they shared. Even the hard days were meaningful because they were filled with love. One afternoon, they sat together watching the sunset. Lisa smiled and said, "You've given me the best gift, Emma. You're truly here with me." When Lisa eventually passed, Emma grieved deeply, but she wasn't overwhelmed by regret or fear. She carried the memories they had created and the lessons her mother had taught her about living life fully despite uncertainty. And so many times in life, we let that fear of losing someone or the fear of the unknown consume us. And it takes precedent over the time we do have. We don't know how much longer we have. We don't know if in 10 years we can make that pitch. We don't know if we can put a job application out tomorrow, because what if you don't have tomorrow? What if today is all you have? But when we let that fear overcome us in life and keep us in our comfort zone, we never know what's truly possible. My friend Sarah and I were talking this morning while we were working out, and I said something and she said, "Oh, I think that created a new neuro pathway in my brain. It like made something click." And I loved the way she said a new neuro pathway, because this is what happened to me when I heard someone say, "Well, what is your potential?" So you hear people say, "Well, they never reached their full potential," or "You need to reach your potential." What is your potential? What is the ceiling on your potential? Because if you never step out of your comfort zone, you're never going to know what that word potential actually means. Sometimes I try things just to see if I can do it. If I can do that, even though it's hard, can my potential, is it going to let me push that far out? What's the worst thing that can happen? That I realize I extended a little too far and need to pull back? But what is your potential? Because your fear will definitely hold you back from ever finding out. So here's my question for you before we do Trivia in the Trenches, my favorite segment in the podcast, and talk about how you can put this to action in your own life. What fear is holding you back from personal growth? So that's what we talk about here on the podcast: navigating personal growth, not achieving it, not checking it off our list, navigating it, because it is something that we are always seeking towards, something that we always need to be looking is, what do I not know today that I need to know? So what fear is holding you back from personal growth? Write it down, put it in the notes on your phone, put it on a sticky note on your mirror in the morning. So let's take a quick break for Trivia in the Trenches. I'm all like sniffly and teary-eyed about Emma for our favorite segment. Trivia in the Trenches. What capital city is the only one located on the equator? Quito, Ecuador. Do you think that's why Ecuador is called Ecuador? Because it's kind of like the name Equator? I don't know. Took out a couple letters or made the D a T, because they just really only like have two letters there, or one letter each. It's not the same. So located on the equator. I have actually stood on the equator. Fun fact. When I was in Kenya in 2013 on a medical mission trip, I'm not a doctor or a nurse, but I can do first aid. And that was very helpful on that trip. And I stood on the equator. I thought it was going to be some big, powerful moment. It wasn't. There was just a sign that was like faded. So it wasn't like as exciting as I'm making it out to be. But anyway. All right. So, what are our takeaways from today? How can we identify these fears in our life, and what do we do next? So the first step is identifying your fears is to name them to diminish their power. So when I was in the crippling weeks of fear of failure, I wasn't naming the fact that that was my fear. I was just ruminating in the what ifs. But once I named it, you're scared of failing. You're scared that this is all going to go under. It didn't. It wasn't. I had irrational thoughts about it, but that's okay because once you name it, you can create a safe space for reflection and begin to write it out, journal it out, put it on an audio note, talk to a friend about it, however you process best. Maybe you walk and think, but naming that fear allows you to have a name and create a safe space for reflection. And then if you've got multiple fears, you can start to categorize them together. Okay. What if you're still like, Brooke, I still don't know what my fear is? Start noticing how your body reacts in certain situations. Do your palms get sweaty? Do you get anxious? Do you avoid and try to stay away from something? What is it that's keeping you from taking that next step? Your body knows. The body keeps score, right? Your body knows and will tell you what your fears are because they manifest in the forms of anxiety and stress and avoidance. So start noticing that. And once you can name those fears, take some time to reflect on them and why they're there, right? So that's our first step. Identify your fears and name them. Then break into small steps what you can do about it. You only need 1 or 2 votes for your future self to get you on the right track. Because remember, our trajectory, where we're headed, is our future. So what does that trajectory look like? If I named fear and I never went back to do budget alignment, it wouldn't have done any good. But I had to take some small steps to sit down and make some changes in the right direction, right? If Liam had never stopped and thought, I don't have to go straight to investors. I could go to my friends and family first, and then a safe space with entrepreneurs. And then I can pitch to investors. He probably would have never got that first yes, right? So, what are something small you can do to help you tackle that fear? Okay. Maybe your fear is the number one fear, the fear of public speaking. There are so many free trainings on TikTok and YouTube now that you can start watching people who have also been scared of public speaking. Megan Hyatt Miller with the Full Focus Company talks about this all the time. She's an eloquent, wonderful speaker. And she talks about how she had a crippling fear of public speaking. And so she began to research why. So she named her fear, she researched why, and then started to adapt and realize that nervous, those butterflies that you get before you speak, that's normal. And that actually fuels you to be better at speaking. And then she started to conquer that fear. Okay. So identify it and name that fear. Make a small step in the right direction. That's that vote for your future self, for who you're going to be this time next year. And then focus on the rewards of the growth and your why. Why do you want to get over this? Because once you make a step in the right direction, you got to take another step and another step and another step. And those steps get scary. But if you can connect back to why you're wanting to face this fear, a couple questions that I tend to find myself constantly reflecting back to is who's going to be impacted by this, right? My why is to impact others. Who's going to be impacted by this? Remember that person, name them, think about them. Maybe it's your family. Maybe it's your life. Maybe it's yourself. Or how can you contribute to the world by conquering this fear? Okay. So being able to name it, take a small step in the right direction, and focus on those rewards or your why will help you experience the reward of will help you experience the rewards of growth rather than staying in that discomfort of fear and getting you out of your comfort zone. So here's my closing thought for you. Courage does not mean you don't get afraid. Courage means you don't let fear stop you. Until next time. Thanks for listening to the Navigating Personal Growth podcast. I'm Brooke Plack. Join me again next week on your favorite podcast platform or on YouTube. This podcast is produced by ClantonCreative.com.